Hello, hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about one of the most recent offering from Salesforce, and in fact one of the most exciting offering from Salesforce, which is Headless 360. Headless 360. I have been hearing a lot of queries about what exactly Headless 360 is, what it does, from a lot of people who follow me on YouTube and other social media channels. And I was thinking of doing a short video on this for people to understand what exactly it is, what is it meant for, what problem does it actually solve, why is it required, how does it change the way we interact with Salesforce. So I thought it would be good for me to basically go um, create a short one for people who are trying to explore and understand this. Right. So, to begin with, let's quickly understand before we get into anything, before we start talking about what is headless 360, etc. Let's understand what is the need for having something like headless 360 from where I so we will talk a little bit about this story. We'll try and understand a bit of context before we straight away jump into the technology itself. Okay. So first thing is what we realized over last few years, and that's something that you would have also noticed. The need for the user interfaces has reduced a lot. The browser dependency. So if you notice, 5, 6 years back, when you used to basically go to your laptop, you used to spend a lot of time on different websites and their user interfaces and all those things. That mattered a lot. Comparatively now, if you see, maybe in last 1 or 2 years, we have been spending a lot of time on AI tools. So we do not go to Google, search for websites, and then try to get then try to navigate through some 10 websites to find an answer. We rather try to go to chat gpt or something like a Claude and try to get answers to things. Okay. So if you see, the overall usage of user interface, not just in Salesforce but in general, has reduced a lot, right? So what has happened overall, and if we talk about the Salesforce ecosystem also, the traditional UI first access, is not able to keep up with the agentic enterprise. So now within Salesforce ecosystem also, we would have noticed, or we would have just seen in the last 2, 3 years, there's a lot of emphasis on um, the agent force and the agents and the agentic AI concept that has been brought in by Salesforce, right? So with that, what has happened? The traditional UI first access or the dependency on the UI has reduced significantly, right? There is the browser dependency has reduced. There is a steep rise of AI agents. That's something which definitely we are seeing. Um, So many channels, many experiences, work happens in Slack. So what is happening, instead of, following the traditional path of going into Salesforce and doing everything, a lot of work is now being done through Slack or similar channels. Okay. And the development has become a lot more faster. So yeah, if we talk about from a development perspective, how things are being developed now, possibly there are very few developers who are writing code from the scratch. Most of the code is coming through uh, some sort of an AI engine. So your code is generated mostly in AI, in an AI tool. Maybe you may be using Claude, or you may be using ChatGPT or something else. Most of the times we try and generate the code, then refine the code and try to use that. So this overall development aspects have become faster. All right. So now what has happened here is, overall, if you look at it, everything is happening through through channels which really do not require too much of a user interface. So think of it. If there is someone who is trying to interact with Salesforce using Microsoft Teams or APIs and MCP tools, I'll be talking about MCP tools, MCP tools, in fact, a little later. Uh, there are things which are being done through AI agents, Slack, mobile app, your other uh, AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, etc., voice assistant, CLI, and automation. Most of these, if you realize, do not require a user interface, right? So that is where Headless 360 comes into picture. Now, what Headless 360 is not. So first of all, before we actually jump into what is Headless 360, let us understand, because I see that there is a lot of confusion also around this. A lot of people are thinking that it is completely replacing the user interface. Salesforce will not have any user interface going forward. Uh, but that is at least at this point of time, that's not completely true. So Headless 360 is clearly not a replacement for Lightning. The Lightning experience that we have, that would stay at least at this point of time. I do not know what would happen 5 years down the line, but at least at this point of time, there are still a lot of companies, there are still a lot of sales reps, there are still a lot of customer support reps who continue to use Lightning. So it's not that everyone is using um, Salesforce through MCP servers or APIs, there are still a lot of end users who continue to use the Lightning experience, and it is not a replacement of Lightning experience. So it coexists with Lightning experience, but it's not something which will basically completely replace or remove Lightning experience. It's not a replacement for Agent Force, of course. Again, there are people who are thinking that is it something which has come up new, which is a replacement, a new technology, or a new name for Agent Force? Maybe. No, it's not. It's not another product. Is it a different offering from Salesforce? Just like the way they, keep on bringing in new offerings like Data Cloud, etc. Is Headless 360 another offering, another product in the product suite? No, that's also not right. And is it only about AI? So there are a lot of questions around, is Headless 360 only about AI, or is it something which is something else other than AI as well? So the fact is that Headless 360 is definitely not just about AI. It is about clubbing all those things together, which includes interacting through APIs. Then there are MCP tools, then CLI commands. So some of these things were already there, right? Like APIs we already had here, CLI commands were there. So any studio Lightning user interface. So collectively now we are talking about interacting through Headless 360 platform. Okay. So let's understand. So what is then changing? So we said what Headless 360 is not. Now let's try and understand then what is changing. So, before we talk about what is changing, what exactly Headless 360 is bringing onto the table, let's do a little bit of comparison between the traditional Salesforce versus Headless 360 platform. So if you look into this comparison, the keywords here are, for traditional Salesforce, the keyword was UI first, whereas for Headless 360, the keyword is API first. So UI is the user interface, API is application programming interface. So that is the keyword. So if we understand this difference, most of the things will become very easy or simple to understand. All right. So let's do a bit of comparison. Let's take a few, small. So traditional Salesforce, what used to happen? Human used to open a browser and log in. This was the approach. Now, most of the times, it's not that a user end user. Most of the times, it's not always, but yeah, most of the times, it's not an end user who is actually going to a browser logging in. Okay. So rather, what is happening? There are authenticated callers. Okay. And it can be human, it can be agent, it can be app or CLI. They are making authenticated calls to the system and trying to retrieve information. So rather than me logging into Salesforce directly, now what I'm doing, I am basically interacting with Salesforce through something else. All right, it can be an external app, it can be an agent, it can be CLI, something like that. Okay, so traditionally the capabilities were buried behind the UI clicks. So there used to be a lot of user interface clicks. So end users used to log in into Salesforce, they used to, click on it. So from a capabilities perspective, now almost every capability, I would still say almost, because there are still certain things which are completely not accessible through APIs and MCP tools, but we can safely say almost all capabilities are now exposed through APIs, MCP tools, and CLI commands, etc. From an experience perspective, one surface was there, which was Lightning experience. Now you can, it depends on you, what sort of experience you want. So it can be any surface. So it's not just the Lightning experience that you are restricted to as an end user of Salesforce. You can use it through Slack, Teams, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. Um, or, maybe through a voice assistant, right? So a voice assistant can now create an account record for you in Salesforce. You do not really need to go to the user interface. You can just give instructions. Hey, can you just go in, create an account for me with this name, and it should be able to do that. Now, developer writes code from scratch. So traditionally, development used to happen when developer used to write code from the scratch. Now, what happens, in comparison to that, the coding agent scaffolds code. So it's not that, we are writing all the code from the scratch. Developers are more involved in reviewing the code and checking if the code is doing what it is supposed to be doing. Uh, Time to value, traditionally it used to take months to implement something. Now it just takes days because a lot of development effort has been reduced. Governance enforced via UI constraints, governance enforced at schema level. So for those who are familiar with Salesforce would understand that we had some governance that we could basically enforce through user interface as well. Now most of the governance needs to be controlled at a schema level. So which validations, sharings, etc. Your code should control things at a schema level, more at a server level rather than on a client side of it. Now, three ways to access Salesforce Headless 360. So Headless 360 is basically the platform which now is being used, the platform layer which is being used to access Salesforce. Okay. And through Headless 360, you can access it using three different access patterns. One is through your traditional REST SOAP API approach. This is something which was always there. We used to, use these things for your external applications and custom apps. So all sort of integrations have always been using these APIs. Uh, Before I go into MCP tools, let's talk about the Salesforce CLI command. So this is also something which has always been there. So developers used to access their Salesforce orgs using the CLI commands, and they used to then uh, work with metadata using CLI commands. So that is there. There's also traditionally something which has been happening, being used in DevOps, CI/CD, etc., and even with coding agents. Now, the third thing that we have, which is the newest thing, which is the MCP tools, right? So now with MCP tools, MCP basically stands for Model Context Protocol. With MCP tools, AI models like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini can discover dynamically and call Salesforce capabilities at runtime. So now MCP tool becomes a standard for these AI tools to interact with Salesforce. So if you have 5 different AI tools that need to interact with your Salesforce, you do not need to, do those integrations individually. Rather, what you would do is you will set up your MCP servers and, let these custom MCP tools, interact with your Salesforce through those MCP servers. We are going to, see all those things. We are going to do an example where you yourself will set up. I'll in fact do that setup and show things to you. So we are going to see a live demo as well for that. So now coming to what is Salesforce Headless 360. So sales, before we again, I'll pause there and talk about the four platform layers that we are talking here. Now, when we are saying that there is this headless 360, which is basically going to be the layer through which you will be interacting with Salesforce, there are four platform layers which Salesforce is talking about here, um, which headless 360 would usually interact with on the Salesforce side of things. Okay, so what are these four layers? So the first layer is agent force, of course. This is something which we are aware of. This is the layer which contains all these AI agents that can reason, plan, and take actions across your business. The second layer that we are talking about here is the customer 360. The customer 360 is the layer of the usual applications which we use in Salesforce, like your Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, all those things that would become part of your customer 360 layer. So these are all your Salesforce applications, automations, workflows, flows, whatever. So all those things are part of your customer 360. Data 360. Data 360 is the third layer, and this is basically something which would unify and harmonize all your data to provide trusted context for every interaction. So data 360 is the layer where you will have all your data harmonized, and Slack. The Slack will basically, be used for bringing people, conversations, apps together to drive engagement. So Slack is the layer which contains all those conversations, etc. And this is the fourth layer. Okay. So now, the moment we talk about what is Salesforce Headless 360, so if you see Headless 360 is simply the access layer. This access layer has three access patterns: APIs, MCP tools, and CLI commands. And through these, it is interacting with these four platform layers, right? So we have the platform layer here, which consists of um, Data 360, Customer 360. We spoke about these things, Agent Force, Slack. And then we have the headless access layer, which includes APIs, MCP tools, CLI commands. So you may be interacting with one of these four layers, either through API or MCP tools or CLI commands. Okay. Now, so we understand this. So earlier it used to be mostly, we used to mostly interact with these layers through user interface always. Now we are talking about the future of interaction with Salesforce applications, the future of interaction with Salesforce application layers or the platform layers. We are uh, talking about accessing those using the headless access layer. Headless basically refers to where you do not have a user interface, right? So that's what headless means. So we are basically talking about headless access layer, which consists of these three things. Okay. Now, why traditional CRM isn't enough anymore? Now we have understood that, okay, fine, this is what is changing, but there is one key question which would come into mind and which we need to understand in order to help businesses achieve what they need to be prepared for, or what they should be uh, starting to move towards. The traditional CRM used to be very, very different. So traditionally CRM used to be for sales or customer support reps to open a browser, then click on certain things, search and find things, perform actions, and all that stuff. So that's how things used to happen traditionally, right? The new way is you are using an AI agent. You just want your AI agent to do everything for you. So let me give you an example. So if you had to create a report traditionally, maybe create a report, go to the report builder tool, then create a report, run the report, see the data. All right. Now with your AI agent tool, you just want to write a prompt. You want to say, hey, I want to see a summary of all my opportunities. And you want this AI agent to be able to generate a summary of all your opportunities and show it to you. You just want to create two leads, and you just are willing to go to an AI agent and ask AI agent to create the leads for you, and it should be able to create the leads. So you simply want to control everything from accessing data to reviewing data, to be able to create data, update records, uh, pull out reports, everything using an AI agent. You really do not want to get into the user interface part of it. That's something which has changed. This is what the right side picture basically shows, the new way the users want to interact. The human beings, even if there is a human being, if AI, it's an AI agent, of course, which is doing everything, of course, AI agent would definitely want to, interact with Salesforce in this mode. Even if there is a human being who is accessing Salesforce, they are now not willing to access Salesforce this way. They are more willing to access it through an AI agent. So now let's understand this as well. The world has moved on. CRM also must evolve. So that is the thing. So initially, CRM used to be something like this. There used to be a user, there used to be a heavy user interface, and there was Salesforce user interface. Now it's all agentic API first world. You are interacting through AI agents, applications, mobiles, IoTs. Even if there is a human user is trying to use it through another AI tool. And if there are integrations, of course, they happen through APIs and MCPs, right? So that is how things have changed, and that's how things are working. The limits, okay, now let's understand the limits of browser-centric CRM. So the traditional CRM, which was the browser-centric CRM, there were a lot of limits with that. Definitely there was UI dependency, it was not real time. So there was some latency, of course. When I say not real time, it would not mean that completely asynchronous, but possibly near real time, but with some latency. There was integration complexity. It was human centric. Now things are more agent centric. Uh, we had limited context, and there was always a scalability constraint. So when we are, too much heavy on the user interfaces, etc., of course, scalability becomes a constraint, right? So traditional CRM flow was user, browser interface, application, business logic, response. Now it's agents, API or MCP tools, platforms, capabilities, events, data, etc. All right. So this is what has changed. Now, we discussed about it a little, earlier. Let's go back to this. We spoke about these three access patterns in the headless access layer. These three patterns, API and CLI, is something that we are familiar with. Now let's talk a little about the MCP tools. Yeah. So what would drive this entire change, right? Now the big question is, now if we are saying that for everything we want to interact with Salesforce uh, through through headless layer, if we have a complete dependency on the APIs or the traditional integration approach, it would be really difficult, or rather time consuming, for us to set up all those integrations individually, right? So if you want to interact through say four different AI tools, and you have to continuously keep on setting up those integrations, etc., it will really become overwhelming, right? That is where the concept of MCP comes into picture. What is MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. MCP is an open standard that allows AI models. Try and understand this. So this is, first of all, this is an open standard. So because it's an open standard, it is recognized universally. So that's one thing. Second thing is, what does it do? It allows AI models and tools to securely discover, understand, and interact with systems like Salesforce. So, what does an MCP do? This MCP, the Model Context Protocol, this is meant for allowing AI tools or AI models to interact with different systems. So in our case it is Salesforce, right? It provides a standardized way to expose capabilities, resources, and actions. So this is what I was talking about. So you really do not need to worry about setting individual integrations, etc. Rather, what you would do is, you would be uh, accessing or setting up connections using MCP. Okay. And now the advantage of using MCP is that one, it's an open standard. Secondly, it provides a standardized way to expose capabilities, resources, and actions. So there is a standardized way for you to, so instead of individually controlling, you are through MCP, there's a standardized way of, defining what access you want to provide, right? So now what we have done, instead of dealing with individual APIs and API connectors, etc., we have standardized the thing. Think of it as something very, very similar to the way, think of MCP more like, if I have to explain it to you in a very simple words, think of MCP more like a Type C port in your laptop, right? So now what has happened? Your headphones will easily connect to your Type C, your mouse would connect to Type CP, your charging point connects to Type C. So what you have done, instead of having 10 different types of ports on your laptop, now what we are doing, we are moving towards a standardized port, right? And we are trying to uh, connect everything through that standardized port. Similar thing applies here. So think of your MCP as more as a Type C port. So it's a standardized way. Um, so your Salesforce system, let's say your Salesforce org, this is your Salesforce org. It will be have hosted MCP servers, and this is a standardized way for other clients to interact with your Salesforce, right? That is it. So you can have your Chat GPT, your Claude, your VS Code Copilot, all these things interacting with your Salesforce with the help of this hosted MCP server. That is what MCP server does. Now, Salesforce has got uh, a lot of pre-built MCP servers, and you can also set up your own custom MCP servers. So for the discussion today that we are having, we will restrict it only to the standard MCP or the built-in MCP servers. Later on, we will talk about custom MCP servers as well. So, and what all can you access through these MCP servers? So you can access almost everything there's something which I discussed some time back. So almost all capabilities within Salesforce can be accessed using these MCP servers. It can be coding MCP servers, business MCP servers, sales, service, data cloud. So you can access these things through MCP servers. Okay. And what all are we talking about accessing through these MCP servers? So one is definitely the metadata. For any sort of development, we would need to interact through these metadata servers. Apex servers, if we are basically talking about the Apex logics and automations. If we want to interact with flows and the flow automation components, then flow servers. If we are trying to interact with the Salesforce CRM data, so there is this core CRM data access, which is allowed. Core CRM data would mean your accounts, opportunities, leads. If you want to review those or if you want to create records and all, you have data cloud server. So if you are using data cloud and your AI models want to interact or want to get some information through the data cloud, which is the unified data repository for you, that can happen, that interaction can happen through MCP servers. Agent force servers, if your AI models again want to interact with the AI agents that you have built within Salesforce, that can be accessed. You have Tableau servers, you have Slack server, so that is it, right? So you have all these type of servers which are available, or you can build custom MCP servers. So everything is not available, but this is more of giving us an idea on what is the overall MCP server landscape on Salesforce, right? And now there are certain MCP servers, as I said, and one thing which we have to understand, this is something which is very, very new. So Salesforce will definitely keep on introducing more and more of these ready-made MCP servers which you can use. At this point of time, we have a few limited MCP servers, but we can certainly expect a lot more to be coming up in coming months or years. Okay, now let's understand how AI clients connect to Salesforce with Headless 360. So let's try and understand this architecture here. Okay, so here is your Salesforce platform. Here is your MCP server. Here is your MCP protocol, and here are the AI clients. So what happens is your AI client basically speaks to your MCP server using the MCP protocol. Okay, these are structured messages. These are secure, and there are standard methods which are used for it. Okay, now your MCP server basically then takes this message and then tries to interact with Salesforce. So what it does, it takes care of authentication, authorization, any search and fetch on Salesforce, and execute and respond. So your MCP server is responsible for interacting with Salesforce and doing these things. And on the Salesforce platform, you would have your metadata, data, Apex Flow services. So everything is sitting here, and this is how the overall end-to-end secure communication happens. So your AI client can be, let's say, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, and then they would interact with your MCP server using these MCP protocols, and then MCP servers will do rest of the connect with Salesforce and try to retrieve the information and show it to you. Okay, so now that we have discussed about this, we have spoken about enough of concepts. Now let's, before we get into more concepts, there are a lot of other concepts which we need to understand to be able to become an expert on this. What we are going to do next is we are going to now go and see some examples, certain things live in action. Okay, so this is my Salesforce org, and what I would do is I would then go and first of all, let me try and show what we would do, and then we will see how do we set it up. Okay, so this is my chat GPT. Let me ask chat GPT. Now my chat GPT is connected to the MCP server. So I would go and ask chat GPT, show